Hello, beautiful vegans. Welcome to Empowered Vegans, the show that inspires and empowers you to live your best life. I'm Mariquita Solis, vegan empowerment coach. Each week, I feature leading experts in the vegan and plant-based world, and we're sharing inspirational stories, practical tips, and having enlightening, empowering conversations. So my mission is to support the vegan community and living a fulfilling, full, peaceful lifestyle while making a positive impact on this world. So I also offer coaching programs. We got one coming up, a group coaching program coming up at the end of June. So reach out to me if you want to take action. If you're feeling stuck, this is for people that are really stuck and don't know how to get out of their own way. They're not taking action and they try. So please reach out to me. I coach people one-on-one, but the group coaching containers are a lot of fun. And again, that's starting late June. So I am very excited to get right down to it. We're going to be talking about advocacy and self-care and how they go hand in hand. Today, my guest is Chris Eubanks, a fellow Georgian in Atlanta. I met him first. I probably met you a few times before, but I saw you recently at the march in December, the Animal Rights March in December. He's the founder of APEX Advocacy, and APEX Advocacy aims to increase the number of BIPOC individuals who participate in animal activism. So welcome, Chris, and welcome everybody who's watching. Hey, JJ, let us know where you're joining from. Give StreamYard permission at the top of the post. Hi, Claudia. So great. I know you all have been excited to see Chris and to listen to, he is a powerful force in Georgia. So let me stop talking and let's let Chris introduce himself. Tell us about you, Chris, and your vegan journey, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And like you said, we met probably a number of times, but yeah, we most recently saw each other at the Veg Fest / Animal Rights March weekend last December. But yeah, my vegan journey, it started, I guess, technically in 2016 when I watched Cowspiracy, but I feel like it predates that and goes back to when I was a 13-year-old, just reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and was inspired by his diet. And he wasn't vegan, but he didn't consume any pigs, and he was real mindful of the things that he put into his body. And I read the book How to Eat to Live by his mentor Elijah Muhammad, and it spoke about healthy eating practices and being devoid of specific animal products. So I slowly started to decrease animal products from my diet when I was 13. And then when I was 17, I became fully vegetarian. And although at the time I wasn't vegetarian for ethical reasons, it was a dietary decision. It did help me begin to think more about the concept of not consuming animals. So I did that for about a decade. And after a decade, I just kind of felt like the weird vegetarian, and I didn't know any other vegetarians. And, you know, there was no community that I could connect with. So I started back eating animal products. But like I said, in 2016, I saw Cowspiracy and stopped eating animal products that same day. And it was initially because I was trying to be a better environmentalist. But I would say within the next year, I started to learn more about the ethics and the exploitation of how animals are used and abused in animal agriculture. And that made me become fully vegan. And I was now not consuming animal products for ethical reasons, solely ethical reasons. And then I slowly started to do activism. And that's kind of how I began to be involved with a lot of the things that I'm involved with today. But yeah, like I said, essentially my journey started at 13, became vegetarian at 17, started back eating animal products around my late 20s, and saw Cowspiracy, became plant based, and a year later went into vegan activist mode.
That's great, and I love what you said about the environmental aspect, that you were an environmentalist, because there's so many environmentalists that don't get the message. thank goodness you got the message, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think it was the medium for me. I mean, Cowspiracy is a great film, and it really connects animal agriculture to the dangers that are happening to the environment. So it really connected those dots. And after watching it, I considered, I just said to myself that I couldn't be the environmentalist that I wanted to be if I was still consuming animal products. And yeah, that was the entryway into other things.
Well, that's great to know. I personally haven't watched Cowspiracy, so but that's really good for me to know. For environmentalists, that would be the movie that I would recommend to them. So
Oh,
yeah, 'cause
absolutely. Yeah.
all these big organizations. So I volunteer at a nature center, and I know that when I went to the dinner for that nature center, there just wasn't, there weren't many,
Mm,
vegans. I was a vegan, of course. I don't know if there were any more. There were some vegetarians, and but I
mm.
don't think it was, Anyway, nevertheless, I'm sure you knew what it was, it was like. So the
Yeah.
usual, yeah. So it's that's interesting. So great. That makes me inspired. So Chris, tell me about the apex and what your goal is in apex advocacy.
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, after I watched Cowspiracy, became vegan after the first year of learning more about the exploitation that happens to animals. I began to do animal activism and volunteered with a variety of organizations from Anonymous for the Voiceless to the Save Movement, PETA, Mercy for Animals, the Humane League. A lot of the mainstream orgs were, I was drawn to the work that they were doing. So I started participating in a lot of different types of actions and activities. And I did that for a couple of years. But what I started to notice was that there wasn't as much diversity in the animal rights movement that there could be. And it was weird that I was within the social justice movement, but I didn't see a lot of different types of faces in the movement. Now, I mean, there are a variety of people doing work in the animal rights movement. It isn't all just one look. It isn't all consisting of just, white men or white women. There's diversity around the world. But in terms of, I think, the mainstream view of the animal rights movement, it tends to feel very white led or white dominated. And I was thinking that I would like to lend my efforts and try to help change this somehow or work towards creating a more diverse movement or just bringing more people of color into the animal advocacy work. But I didn't really know how to go about it. So I pondered on it for a while, and what I came up with was I needed to have a space and an organization where I could censor people of color doing animal activism. And that was the goal of APEX. So APEX is an acronym. It stands for Animal Protection, Equality, Intersectionality. So all of our work is animal rights based, and everything that we do is for animal rights. But we also understand how the intersections of human rights also impact animal agriculture, or how animal agriculture impacts human rights, whether that's, you know, workers in animal agriculture being exploited, whether that's the environmental racism that happens because these factory farms are traditionally placed in black and brown communities, how that manure and waste runoff pollutes their air, um, how these industries essentially prey on the prison industrial complex and almost recruit people from prison to work in slaughterhouses. And just starting to see how all of these connections work, I felt like I needed a space where I could talk about these things without any restraints. And I've worked with a ton of other organizations that have been great, but I felt like for me to really hone in on this concept of making space for people of color, it would have to be an organization led by people of color, created by people of color, that address our concerns in advocating for animals and how we see advocating for animals. And that's what led me to create APEX. So APEX essentially is a space where we are trying to create a community of people of color that advocate for animals. And we have a lot of different initiatives and campaigns that we're working on. But yeah, we essentially are making space for people of color to advocate for animal rights.
And how is that going? I know that, I mean, I think about soul food, and I remember Dr. Milton Mills' presentation at Veg Fest and talking about, I mean, it's really sad, the soul food being so destructive for health, and it just being the food that's the leftovers, and it's really sad. And so, what can you say about that? And
Yeah, I mean, well, as far as Apex, I think we're doing really good. I think the first year or so was just me learning about how I should run an organization, because I've been a grassroots activist. Like, as you know, here in Atlanta, I've helped organize the first two animal rights marches in Atlanta. I've been a community organizer here in Atlanta. I worked, like I said, with the Animal Save movement. I led visuals for years. I've led the Anonymous for the Voiceless chapter here, doing vegan outreach for years. And yeah, I was mainly experienced in grassroots organizing, but I wasn't necessarily experienced in running a nonprofit, which is two different skill sets. So I essentially just had to learn how to become an executive director on the job. And it was really a eye-opening experience, just going from community organizer to now being the person that kind of oversees initiatives and campaigns and files paperwork for a 501c3 status and bylaws and creating a board of directors, all of those things that I really had no experience in doing. I've been learning how to do those on the job. So it's been going great. Now I finally feel like Apex is in a place where we can we have finally honed in on a few campaigns that we're passionate about. We kind of have our vision board, if you will, for the remainder of the year and next year. We're starting to communicate with donors and funders and have a growing base of supporters. So it's been a slow grind to actually get us to where we need to go, but it's been going well. And as far as, I guess, health and food consumption that isn't advantageous to Black and Brown people, I think a lot of the foods that we have been, well, I'll say one thing. I think with colonization and how people of color have been stripped from their heritage, that was the beginning of introducing these foods that weren't native to us into our diet. So before that, Black and Brown people have a strong lineage of eating high doses of, I was going to say doses, but high percentages of plant-based foods. But with colonization, like I said, we were introduced to chitlins and pig feet and all of these foods that were just left over from colonizers enslaving us. So that kind of laid the foundation for how we've been eating the last, several hundred years. But I do feel like there's a resurgence as of lately in terms of connecting to our roots and eating foods that are more in line with our true heritage, um, than I've seen previously. So yeah, I would say in the last few years, I think there's been a true renaissance of Black and Brown and Indigenous people connecting with those foods and eating healthier and being more mindful about how the things that we consume impact our diet and our health.
yes, and we are moving forward thanks to change makers like you and other people of color, really, I mean, being leaders and taking the initiative to bring new plant seeds. And that's all we can do is plant seeds. And so I'm very thankful for you, Chris, and your journey is amazing and your experience. And I love your peacefulness. It's very calm, a peaceful presence. That's what we need in a leader, right?
Well, thanks.
Calm.
Yeah, I've always been like that. I've just always been naturally relaxed. I kind of joke about how I don't really need to smoke weed because I'm kind of just a natural relaxed person. So I don't know what would happen if I did, but yeah, I've always been that way. Just been in me since I was a child, to just kind of be real relaxed and reserved and not be too emotional and very stoic. It's just a part of my personality.
Well, it's nice, and that's what we need is leaders that are keeping their cool and very rational. I love it. So yes. So let's talk about the self-care. I know before we went live, we were talking a little bit about both of us really knowing that it's very important to bring that in. And I know for myself, like this morning, I had a giant list of meetings and then um, getting things out to my clients and preparing for the new events. And so, yeah, and I had to just go outside and take some deep breaths. Like felt like I can't handle all this. And I actually thought for a minute, you know what I need to do is thank myself for
Mm.
working so hard, for getting up at 5 o'clock this morning, for getting in the shower, getting dressed, and just keep going. Even the smallest thing is getting up out of bed, right? And when there's so much on your plate, right, on my plate, and that's great though. I believe in what I'm doing, so really to acknowledge myself was is something that thank goodness the universe said thank yourself, and so I did spend that time outside thanking myself, and I felt a lot more peacefulness. So let's talk about that. And why do you say that advocacy and self-care go hand in hand, Chris?
Oh yeah, they absolutely go hand in hand, and I think for a lot of people in not even just animal rights, but that's the community that I'm most familiar with or I work in the most. I think there's been a narrative of, the animals suffer, so I can't take a break because they're being killed by the billions every day, every minute of the hour. So who am I to take a break? And, what does that mean about me and my efforts if I am not giving 200% to advocate for animals? And I understand that the passion and the anger that drives us can motivate us in a variety of ways, but I also think that we have to realize that I believe the true revolution will be led by people that are well rested, that are um, reaching their highest level, that aren't burnt out, that are doing advocacy in a sustainable way. And I think that is the energy that we need to have within the movement. I don't think we need to have a energy of burnout, acceptance, and normalizing, just pushing ourselves to the limit because the animals suffer so much. And like I said, I get it. I understand the that animosity towards what is happening to the animals, but I think we have to operate at the best versions of ourselves, and the best versions of ourselves aren't when we're burnt out, aren't when we are stressed out, aren't when we are tired from doing, you know, 10 to 20 actions a month. I think the best versions of ourselves are when we are able to pace ourselves at a sustainable pace. And a lot of that is just being able to prioritize your self care along with any efforts that you make in advocacy work. So that's something that I've done intentionally over the last, I would say, year or so. I've tried to balance out making sure that I am looking out for myself and working on myself as much as I'm working on advocating for animals or animal liberation. I think it goes hand in hand because I always think about, who do we want to be if we are ever to achieve animal liberation or collective liberation? Do we want to be people that are only used to pushing ourselves to the limit and burning ourselves out? Like, we have to really allow space for us to grow as individuals, because if we achieve collective liberation tomorrow, what type of people will we be? We should be working towards being the best versions of ourselves while we are working for collective liberation. I think those things go hand in hand. So it's something that I've made a, a conscious effort to do, which is why I sort of transitioned from doing animal activism as a volunteer to doing animal activism as a career, because I realized that I needed that space to still be a person, and I can work on animal activism in a, quote unquote 9 to 5 space. And then outside of that space, I'm free to be whoever I am. I'm free to watch Netflix, you know, go to the movies, go to a concert, go to a spa, just do all those things that I want to do as a person and get that fulfillment as an individual, while also devoting every ounce of time that I have available to animal activism. So I think that's just a long way of saying that we have to balance out caring for ourselves along with advocating for animals, because they go hand in hand.
Yes, and I agree with you. And that's the only reason I am able to do what I am today is because I took care of myself and really am the greatest version that I can be in this moment, right? There's no way I could be doing this 10 years ago. So definitely, I realized that I had to care for myself. So everything you're saying definitely makes a lot of sense. And it's crucial. I know a lot of people feel like they have to watch the videos over and over. And that is, it's traumatizing. And the more we traumatize ourselves, the more hurt we are, and it's very hard to feel powerful if we're hurt and sad. It doesn't. It's not really in alignment if we're hurt. I mean,
Hmm.
sure, we can feel hurt and sad, and then we can let that go. But we don't want to just keep traumatizing ourselves over and over. But yes, I've had clients come to me and say, I feel like, just like you said, it's my duty to watch these things. It's my duty to push myself to to death because of the animals and this is the feeling of we have to do everything. And I just talked about this the other day in a live stream. The fact that we don't have to do everything. We do have to do something, but we don't. We
Hmm.
can't do everything, and that's why you're over there doing what you're doing in the communities of color, and I'm doing what I'm doing here. And we've got Claudia in France. She's doing what she's doing. JJ's doing what she's doing in Maryland. We're all doing, and then we got Dana in another part of Atlanta. So we're all doing everything we can. So it's not one person, and to acknowledge that, right? And that's very important about self care, acknowledging and celebrating what we've done. So yeah, I really agree with you, Chris. And so I want to look at these comments. I see that someone is saying, here in the UK, the fastest growing vegan population is in the African communities.
Yeah, and African American communities are. It was just actually it's funny. I just met Tracy McCorder this weekend at the Vegan Women's Summit, and she just spoke about this in the latest issue of Essence, I believe. How vegans, the fastest growing population of vegans are African Americans, and I kind of think that's going back to the point I said earlier about how I think in Black communities, specifically here in the U.S. and the states, that we're starting to have uh, that resurgence of connecting to our true lineage and decolonizing a lot of the practices that were done to us by colonization. We're beginning to strip away a lot of that, and I think a part of that is getting more in touch with foods that were more natural to our diet before colonization. So yeah.
Right. And so I don't see many people of color when I'm out there and doing these activist events. I see a few, and I really don't see maybe one. I usually see one man, and it's mainly women. So I know that we've got a long way to grow. But I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear with you what you're saying and the comments that the African population in the UK and here is really growing. That makes me feel good. And somehow, what about you, Chris? Do you know a lot of vegans or environmentalists, or I mean vegans, I guess, whole food plant based, that are men?
Oh yeah, I mean, one of my closest friends, you know Luis. I think you know Luis.
Oh yeah, he was on here.
Yeah, yeah. So, he is a local organizer, and we organized actions for years in Atlanta. He's like one of my closest friends in the movement. And yeah, him, I mean, it's tons of people that I've met over the years. I will say that, I mean, largely the animal rights movement is mostly women. I believe the statistic is like 80% women and 20% men, which I think that's fairly accurate in my experiences. But yeah, there are tons of men doing great things and advocating for animals. I also sometimes feel that the men in the movement, even myself to a certain degree, um, get a lot of notoriety and attention because we are men in the movement, and that the women in the movement don't get their the limelight. Not that any of us are chasing limelight or recognition, but yeah, sometimes the men in the movement do get a large share of the attention.
Right, definitely. So I agree with you because we see a lot of women, but when a man does stand out, so
Hmm.
I'm looking at more of these comments, and we've got Cambria, and she's saying she's been vegetarian for since 14 and vegan for 15 years. That's wonderful. And we've got, well, she's also saying she's sending love and respect, vegan,
Right.
vegan greetings.
Absolutely. Back at you.
Yes, and then let's see. Let me look at. I've got some more comments here. Here's. Let me see. All right. I'm not sure who this is, but thanks for watching. What about the rich? Can I ask about classism and how I believe it's the root of all prejudices, including speciesism? Speciesism.
Hmm. Interesting comment. The root of all injustices. Well, I think before class, before color, honestly, I feel the root of all discrimination is looking at others as others. I think we start to draw these social constructs about different types of individuals, and then from there we put them in boxes and separate them based on color, class, gender, race, um, and I think that thinking of other individuals are different from me and I'm not connected to them is actually the root of all discrimination. Because if we were to honestly see everyone else and every other thing as an extension of us, there wouldn't be any discrimination. And I try my best to live that practice. And I mean, that's a part of why I'm vegan, because I don't think I'm superior to an ant. I don't think I'm superior to a plant. I don't think I'm superior to a grain of dirt. We're all made of the same basic molecules and atoms and protons and electrons on a molecular level. If you break us down, almost everything in the universe is made out of the same basic elements. But somehow we have come to believe that as humans, we are superior to other individuals and separate from other things in the universe. And I think that is literally the root of all types of discrimination. When we see every living thing and everything in the universe is just another extension of us or a different version of us instead of something else, I think that will go a long way into, getting us to the highest version of ourselves, where we see everything. It's kind of like The Matrix is one of my favorite films. It is my favorite film, and there was a point in The Matrix where the main character started to see things differently and decode and understand how things work. And I kind of felt like that when I became vegan and understood that, wow, this whole universe is an ecosystem of things, an ecosystem of life and elements, and I'm just one of the many. So I don't see myself as superior to anyone. I don't see anyone as inferior to me. I just see myself as another version of everything else that exists in the universe. And I think when you see existence in that way, you start to not think about looking at people based on their class and gender and race. You acknowledge that those things exist and have a, a weight on our society, but you yourself don't think in that manner. You kind of think more fluid and you accept people, individuals, animals, non-human, human as they are. So yeah, so I think just seeing others as others is actually the root of all of these different types of discriminations and oppressions.
Yeah, and that reminds me, listening to Dr. Will Tuttle, the same thing. I mean, that it's something that we are all together, and that's how he was able. I mean, he was so loving and compassionate about the fact, let's say the slaughterhouse workers, right? When you don't see them as horrible people or as the enemy or other, right? You're able to see this is part of of the hurt, right? This is part of this global, this universe, right? And this is a part that's hurting, right? I mean, like they say, hurt people hurt others. So, and we've got to heal those people instead of seeing them as the bad person or they're different from us. They're in a different situation than we are, yes, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where we can have compassion for them. Like, I see that you're in a situation. I don't know about your situation. It's easy for me to look at you and make a judgment that, look, what you're doing is horrible, but I don't know what's got put you there, right? I don't know if you're going home, and many of these poor people are doing drugs and alcohol, and they're really caught in this cycle. I mean, how could you go to a slaughterhouse every day and not be traumatized and not do something like just to numb that?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's when we see each other as part of this beautiful unit, then we can heal and we're not separating ourselves. So we got, let's see, we got some more comments here. We are all one. This is Claudia. This gives us strength. Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. And Allison, thanks for joining us. Vegan empowerment is so important. Yes, we got to empower ourselves first with the self care, the self
Mm-hmm.
compassion,
Sure. Absolutely.
right? And as long as we can't eradicate classism, racism, and sexism, the fight against speciesism remains very hard. Yeah, it's all connected, and like you were saying, Chris, and there's not any others. We are
Yeah.
all one.
Yeah. And I think I do understand that point though about how I think there's a certain tolerance in our society or intolerance in our society for a lot of the, I don't know how to say it, I guess the more known forms of discrimination like racism and sexism and classism. I think in general, if you approach most people and ask them, are they racist or do they support sexist behavior, for the most part, people will say no, and that's frowned upon. But speciesism isn't quite as frowned upon in our society. So I do feel like, you know, that'll be, I guess, one of the, I can't say last pillars of discrimination to fall, but I do think it's one of the more challenging systems of oppression to fight just because it's so ingrained in our society. All of these other discriminations are also ingrained in our society, but I think speciesism is unique in that most of the people in our society contribute to it willingly, um, 3, 4 times a day by the things that they eat, the things that they wear, the products that they put on their face and their body, come from testing on animals. So yeah, speciesism, and honestly, speciesism isn't as known of a word. So the concept of the discrimination towards animals based on their bodies isn't a concept that is as known as discrimination against individuals based on their race or sex or class. So yeah, they are definitely all connected, and we have to fight them as such. But I do think yes, speciesism is very unique in the fact that a lot of our society contributes to it willingly, and a lot of our society contributes to it without even knowing or not even thinking about it because it's so ingrained in our society.
Right. Yes, and I know that. Okay. So I'm the leader of the animal ministry at my church. So I'm really doing my best to quietly try to enlighten people without this V, the big V, that turns people off. But yes, it's challenging sometimes. I mean, we're talking about from religious leaders talking about that that our value. I mean, the translations of certain, like perhaps the Bible, right, has been translated wrong, incorrectly. Like, well, the dominion, right, and
Mm.
things like that. Really, when we did address this in church the other day, and they Reverend Richard asked, what does dominion over animals mean? And so I kept quiet. And
Mm.
he did explain afterwards, because I think there was someone that, I don't remember the response, but then he explained it means being responsible, taking care of these
Mm.
animals. It doesn't mean, of course, the dominion gives everybody the right to do whatever they want. That meaning, the meaning that I'm trying to avoid living and doing everything against. So, yeah. So anyway, so let me show another comment. Oh, here's a fun one. Just, can you two give some music recommendations? Thanks, I appreciate you too. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm a huge hip hop R&B fan. I like a lot of lo-fi instrumental music. So I would recommend Nas is he's my favorite artist of all time. He's a rapper from Queens, New York. Um, I love him. Who else? I love Snow Allegra. She's a soul singer. Is incredible. Sade. I love Sade. Um, I love Nipsey Hussle. You know, he was killed a few years ago. His music really resonated with me. The Roots, I love the Roots. They're a hip hop band. They have an incredible lyricist named Black Thought, who's the MC, but the everyone else in the group plays a musical instrument, and they're incredible. So yeah, those are some of my favorites. And Common, he's one of my favorite rappers. He's a rapper from Chicago. So those are some of mine. But how about you, Mariquita? What are some of yours?
Well, I love Dave Matthews Band, and I know that he does care. I don't think he's fully vegan, but I know he cares about the earth. That's important to me. So, but I also love people that aren't aware too. Other bands, REM, because I grew up
Mm.
and I went to UGA and the Athens scene, the Athens music scene. So I love REM. I always loved 10,000 Maniacs.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I'm a big disco girl here.
Okay.
So I love Casey and the Sunshine Band, the Bee Gees. Um, yeah, so I love that kind of the 70s, like my boyfriend will say, the sappy music. Yeah, very Manuel, whatever. I love it. So
Yeah.
it's fun too. Yeah, I mean, it's nice escapism, right? To go, uh,
Yeah.
village people. So yeah,
Hmm.
those are fun. But yeah, well, thanks for that. That was a little bit
Yeah.
lightheartedness.
You can start a playlist for some of those artists.
Right. All right. So now we've got some more comments. Allison is saying, peace begins on your plate. Amen. And it's a good way to live. And now
Hmm.
we've got another comment. Some of the slaughterhouse workers are bad and they don't care. They do not care, but some of them is just plain brainwashed to believe that it's sad, but it has to be done for people's demands. Yes, and yes, we're going against the belief that we have to eat meat. So if
Hmm.
we're starting from that foundation, that's a whole different from our knowledge. So what would you say to this comment, Chris?
Yeah, I would say there are bad people doing, or there are people that I would say do bad things in a variety of situations. And yes, some people have, you know, higher inclinations of violence than others. Um, we're complex individuals as humans. So I think if you look at any job or any profession, you're going to find people that are damaged, broken for whatever reasons. I just think that the human spirit in general is more positive than negative, and I think it is in our nature to be compassionate and loving. But I do think that as we navigate through life and navigate through living, we get worn down by society in a variety of ways, and molds and shapes some of us into not being the best versions of ourselves. And that could be whether you're a slaughterhouse worker, whether you're a banker, whether you're a politician. We all have, for lack of a better word, demons to fight. and I don't look at people in one specific job title or role as being bad because they are in that role. I just look at individual people and try to understand their personal journey and struggle into why they are the way they are, and hopefully through education, through normalizing new types of behavior, we can help more and more people be the best versions of themselves. Some people aren't open to it. Some people will be damaged and continue to think and operate at lower vibrations. But I think in general, like I said, the human spirit is loving and caring and compassionate, and that's that's what we should be focusing on how to get us to the highest vibration as possible, and not necessarily focusing on the lower vibrations of our actions as humans.
Exactly. And yes, and someone saying, yeah, sadly, people need jobs too. It's a sad situation, and that's very, very true. Right? It is a sad situation.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing the best we can here. And
Mm-hmm.
so, um, let me see here. I'm looking at more comments. Many slaughterhouse workers do the same things that their fathers did on the farms. Yes, exactly, and that's what they're taught. And when we're taught this, it's hard to break out of it. But I ask myself how deeply disconnected someone must be to kill animals for so many hours that they may even have to wear Pampers because they don't even stop in order to go to the toilet. This is a folly beyond imagination. Yes, and there are many ways to look at that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we could look at it, and I'm not saying that you're looking at it like this, Claudia. I'm saying that that people can look at it for many ways, like look at it judging them, or look at it with compassion, or look at it with curiosity, like I wonder what's going on here, or look at it very logically. So it's about how we look at it, and then Chris is looking at it like, what's the vibration here of this person? What has caused them? What happened in their past to bring them to this place where they're at. And maybe there's a way that we can help them, right? Vibrate on a higher level, which is about learning to have compassion for themselves and have compassion for this whole planet, right? So that they can take care of themselves. And with our help, hopefully we can help these people that are stuck in these situations as slaughterhouse workers to get out of that. So really what needs to happen is we've got to befriend these people, befriend the slaughterhouse workers and help them get out of these situations. And you can't befriend some. I mean, how can we befriend someone if we're judging them? So I'm not saying anybody's judging. I'm not saying anybody here is judging anybody, but I'm saying, just in wonder, how can we do this if I'm going to the slaughterhouse worker and saying, I'm judging you, but yet I want to be your friend? It's not in alignment. So those are my comments. What would you like to say, Chris?
No, I think you're spot on. I think we have to look at people as individuals, and I think that's one of the things that I learned with doing a lot of vegan outreach, and also how I started to, I guess, think differently about vegan outreach. I think initially I was introduced to vegan outreach, and for those of you all that don't know what that is, essentially when you go out into the streets and public places and you have conversations with people about animal rights and becoming vegan. The way that I used to do it was we used to have a group of us and we used to wear these TV screens with slaughterhouse footage being shown, and we would talk to people about transitioning into veganism. And initially, I think the thinking was to try and win an argument. Like that was kind of the tone of it. But as I evolved in the conversations, I started to look at people as individuals and not necessarily try to debunk veganism to them, but more so just connect with them as individuals. So, if I had 15 to 20 conversations with people at the end of the day, the goal wasn't to ask how many people I converted to veganism. It was just to think about how many productive conversations I had, how many fruitful conversations I had. And I think that's kind of how we have to look at people in these situations, or at least that's the type of mentality we have to have. If we are going to possibly convert more people to veganism and be anti-species. We have to connect with them on a human level. So I think that's the mentality that we have to exercise when we are approaching others that may not, be where we are. And we have to also acknowledge that we weren't always like this. There was a time when I was eating animals 3 or 4 times a day, when I was wearing animals and I was buying products that were tested on animals, and these things weren't a thought to me. And even if someone did maybe mention it to me in the past, it went in one ear and out the other, not because I wasn't compassionate. It just wasn't on my radar enough to, really stick in my head. So I think we just have to understand that the best way to connect is to look at people as individuals and kind of strip away those titles and um, those assessments that we have about them, and just try to connect with them as individuals first.
Yeah, you're right, definitely. And I love what you say. It's like you're when you think I'm not here to win the argument or win the debate or win the discussion, and you just think I want to have a productive conversation, and you're responsible for that, right? I mean, of course, if somebody wants to argue, then you stop. But it's still, if you're presenting in a productive and a kind fashion, then you can still check that off. I did my part to extend. Would you care to listen? Or I invite you to listen, right? And in a peaceful manner. And if they don't want to, that's fine. You did your best and you still give yourself credit. You still celebrate yourself. It wasn't a failure, no, and you still remain calm and for the next person, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm ready for the next. I'm still going to bring in my peaceful, kind energy and I'm going to let go of any expectations. You don't have to change your mind, but I just want to have a nice dialogue. And then everything shifts. You can actually live in peaceful peace when you acknowledge yourself and it's not dependent on them. What you're dependent on is your behavior, right? I can only control myself and I can be someone that's an attractant, or I can be a repellent, which is someone trying to force something down your throat, right? So I am responsible for myself. And if I did a good job, even if nobody said they wanted to be vegan or nobody wanted to hear it, I still go home and I say thank you to myself and I acknowledge, and this is a self care, like you're saying, acknowledging, I did a good job, Chris did a good job, and make sure you're acknowledging other people, right? So we all uplift. And so what you're doing is great. And being a part of these organizations from a young age, realizing that you needed to join others is so powerful. So exciting. And so let me show one more comment. Rowdy Girl Sanctuary helps transition animal farmers to plant-based farming. That's exciting, yes. And do you know any of the, do you know Renee from Rowdy Girl? I'd love to meet her.
Yeah, I've had a call with Renee. I also know about another organization that does something similar, Farm Transition Academy. Um, they just actually, I partook in their 4-week training to talk to um, ranchers and farmers about transitioning and templates and how they go about it. So they do incredible work. Mercy for Animals has a transition program called Transformation, where they assist that process also. And that's something we've done at Apex also. We have a campaign called No Backyard Slaughter, where we recently found out about 2 local backyard slaughterhouses that were operating out of literally people's backyards. And that's our goal is to, approach them and see if they are open to transitioning. So it's something that we've done on a smaller scale. But yeah, I'm familiar with a few of the organizations that are doing that work.
Well, that's very inspiring. I'm happy to hear that these big organizations are doing that because again, we've got to help these people trapped in these systems that don't know any other way to make money. And the peacefulness. And I've seen documentaries. I've seen people talking about how happier their lives are now that they're not involved anymore in animal agriculture.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's great that you took that course. And where did you take it again?
As Farm Transition Academy, that's the name of the organization. I don't know how often they do it. I think this was the first one, but yeah, it was like a 4-week course. It was an hour. on Sunday, and they had, I think, a guest speaker for one of the presentations come in and talk about their experience, and they just provided a lot of tools. They did some problem solving with the people that were in the call based on their specific situation and how they could possibly help and approach specific farmers in their area that they were talking to. So it was a really great program. But Farm Transition Academy is the name of the organization.
Well, that gives me a lot of hope. So, do you know any farmers personally that have changed?
I don't know of any personally, but I've seen, obviously a variety of videos that showcase some that have transitioned, and it's pretty inspiring. And I think one thing that has to be acknowledged is that, just because these programs are available, it doesn't mean that they have a high rate of success. But that's not the obviously the goal would be to transition all of them. But when you're doing any type of transition work, you have to know that more than likely it won't succeed, or you know people may not be open and willing to transition. It's a very taxing. It can be a very taxing experience, but it's about getting better as you go about the process. Maybe the first two or three people you speak to won't be open and willing. Maybe the fifth or sixth person will, and that's when you can really use all those skills from those previous experiences. So it's not necessarily a high rate of success, but honestly, just having these conversations and connecting with farmers that are open to transitioning, or even having the conversation, honestly, is a success in its own right, because these are people that are trained into doing business and treating animals in a specific way for generations, probably. And now you're able to start a conversation with them about undoing some of that. That's in itself a success. And you kind of have to find successes in other ways, even if you don't achieve the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's very true. That is a success if you have a conversation. So, Allison's saying the 40-year-old vegan I've never heard of. He used to be an inspector for slaughterhouses, I believe. Now he's an activist. That's great. So I'm gonna have to look up the 40-year-old vegan. That's very hopeful. Do you know him or her or him?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I've heard of him.
All right. Well, that thanks for sharing that, Allison. And so, Chris, what does your self-care regimen look like?
Yeah, so I think my self care regimen is, like I said, essentially I had to make the decision to transition doing animal advocacy into a job. And that allowed me the space to do all of these other things, because before I was a wedding videographer, and then I would volunteer all of my free time doing animal activism. So I really didn't have a balanced work life. It was just essentially work and volunteer. And that was it. That occupied like 90 to 95% of my time. But when I realized that that wasn't going to be sustainable for me for the rest of my life, and there are some people that can volunteer on the outside of their traditional work, and more power to anyone that does that. I'm not trying to diminish anyone that doesn't work in animal advocacy. I'm just saying, for me, I felt like I really wanted to make my work animal advocacy, so that was my goal. And once I made my work animal advocacy, my self care just began to take priority, because now I allowed myself more time to be a person. So I am one thing that I do is I really prioritize rest and relaxation. So, I don't necessarily have to go out to do a ton of events, or, be seen here and there, although I do go out. But yeah, just having enough time for myself, whether that's 5 hours of binge watching Netflix, or 5 hours of going out to a restaurant and hanging out with friends, having that free time to decide whatever I want to do is my self care. And I think as long as you allow yourself the most amount of time for you, um, that begins to be a gateway to practicing healthier self-care.
Amen to that. Yes, and not to feel guilty about it. That's very important. I love what you're doing. And
Exactly. Yeah.
so let me ask you one more thing. I'm curious about. So
Mhm.
we all have families, and we always hear our families don't want to listen. What about your family, Chris? Are they all vegan, and do they listen to you?
So none of my family is vegan, and I will say it's not that they don't listen, but honestly, I don't really bring up veganism around my family. And I think a part of that is because although I want the world to not exploit animals, I'm not uh, trying to convert people. I'm not trying to, well, let me rephrase it. I'm not having conversations with people on an everyday basis, trying to get them to convert. I do my work and I let the work speak for itself. So my family knows that I'm an animal rights activist. They know that I'm vegan. I've even taken the liberation pledge. So I don't sit at tables where animals are eaten. My, you know, family is aware of that. And, so when I'm around them, I probably I'm not eating at the same table as them unless it's a table that doesn't have animal products. So I don't have to have these conversations. And I'm also not triggered by other people's decisions, honestly. I think that's a part of just my personality, like you were saying earlier, and how we were discussing how I'm kind of a calm natured person. A part of that is I understand that people have the free will to make choices that I don't agree with, and I have to accept that. My ego doesn't allow me to feel that just because I think people shouldn't exploit animals, that they won't take it upon themselves to support exploiting animals. And that's just an unfortunate reality that people have that option in life to do so. So what I focus on is doing the work and not really trying to convince my family and friends to be vegan. I feel like they know who I am. They know the work that I do. So it doesn't really personally serve me to try to push that on them. Obviously, I'm completely open to it. I will help them in any way possible if they bring it up to me. I'm all on board for them transitioning and will help in any way possible. But it's not something that I actively bring up with my family just because like I said, have to accept that people will make decisions and I just have to live with that. But yeah, if they are open to it, I'm open to assisting them. But I don't try to have conversations and force them to uh, live the way that I live or eat the way that I eat or see animal advocacy in the light that I see it. Even though I want them to, it's just not comfortable for me to always do that because I do need to practice that self care and just be a person around my family and have those relationships with them and not have to always have this, tension with them about this issue.
Yeah, that's very important. I love what you're saying right there. So, because so many of us just want to strangle our families, right? Or maybe you don't, but not you, Chris, but maybe, I know when you feel frustrated. So when we just like, we don't always have to be advocates. And what you're doing is letting your work, who you are, speak for, for
Mhm.
itself. They know who you are. They know your beliefs. So you don't have to say anything. You are living in alignment and they see that. And that's beautiful that you're separating you're not living in your ego thinking, oh my gosh, you're not taking it personally, you're allowing them to be who they are, but you're standing strong in who you are and letting your life speak for itself. So that's amazing. I love that. So thank you for that, Chris. um,
Absolutely.
all right, so we have time for one last question. So Chris, I have a ARA ideas to help non-vegans to make the connection. Is there any idea I can connect with you so you can help me with that? So, Chris, this is a good question. Where are people going to be able to get a hold of you, and can you address that, please?
Yeah, ARA ideas. I don't know if I understand what that means, so maybe you can add more.
And have any ideas to help non-vegans? I'm not sure what, but anyway. So,
Yeah, but essentially, yeah, you can contact me either through my email address. That's soulyoubanks@gmail.com. That's SOUL. Maybe I'll drop it in the chat if I can. SOULEUBANKS@gmail.com. I'm also animal rights activist. Okay.
SOUL. What's the rest? SOUL. What?
SOUL and my last name Eubanks
Oh, okay.
EUBANKS at gmail.com. You can get in touch with me directly there. So underscore Eubanks on all social media platforms. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Uh, I'm accessible on there also. But email is the best way to get in touch with me. So if you have any ideas to connect with me or just keep in touch, that's the best way to communicate.
All right. Well, this has been very inspiring, and I love your peacefulness again. You're calm, and you know who you are. You've worked on yourself, and your vibration. We talked about vibration. I love it. You're elevating your vibration every day with self care and acceptance of who people are, and you're not taking it personally. These are just so powerful lessons to hear, and that's why you're able to have this peaceful energy. It's because of this whole foundation that's allowing, learning, watching, and being. So thank you, Chris, for this wonderful conversation, and thank you everybody for joining us. Um, and yes, please connect with Chris. And whoever sent that comment says ARA means animal rights activists. So
Okay.
So, yes, and so we got Chris's email, everybody. And thank you, Angela, for joining us. She's a great inspiration. Yes, you're beautiful, Angela. She's out there working out and showing people that at every age you can be healthy and you can raise your vibration physically. And we're all raising our vibration. We've learned a lot here today, and we're very grateful for you all. And thank you,
Thank
Chris,
you.
so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, namaste, vegan, everybody. Love you all, and we'll say goodbye.
All right.